With episode 2 of the How to Love Freely podcast. I have with me my friend Thomas.
How you doing?
You want to give yourself a little background? Introduce yourself real
Let's
quick.
see. I'm a streamer. I guess I don't like the word content creator, but I guess like I kind of am. I do that as a hobby, but my current job is environmental field technician. I just graduated from NMSU in this past May. Actually, it's
Mhm.
not gonna be. It's gonna be a year pretty soon. So it'll be nice to like go back and since we're on the topic of learning for today, I think it'll be good to go back and look over like my past experiences, how I feel now versus how I felt when I was still in college.
Yeah, for sure. And school's obviously going to be a big part of what's talked about today in general, just because it's the building of learning.
Right.
All right, and
It's how we spend. Oh,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
it's. I was gonna say that's how we spend most of our lives, learning not just subjects like math, science, English, history, and it's also how we learn to socialize
Well,
with
yeah,
people who aren't direct family.
yeah, because that's such a big part of it. I mean, we all have an effect on each other. No matter what we do, we're all, like what we say, what we do, that action is going to be felt by somebody else.
And especially with how large our society is, it's kind of important. It is important to make sure people know how to behave normally around each other.
Mm-hmm. And that is learned behavior to an extent. Some of it is kind of intrinsic, but a lot of it we do learn by just what we observe from others.
Yeah.
And I think so. Going on to like the first question that I had on the list on how do you learn, I think for me, like that hands-on kind of learning is super important. And the way that like I see that is like today I'm getting to do the coolest thing for work, dog. I'm getting to build a dragon.
Yo, wait. What does that mean? What do you mean
I'm,
building a dragon?
I mean, I'm building a dragon. We have to decorate, right, for the Kung Fu Panda movie. And this isn't endorsed, no
Yo,
endorsement, no endorsements, but we have to make a decoration for it, and so we decided on a kind of like Chinese dragon, and we're gonna have
yeah.
it hang off the stair railing and have its open mouth, with the dragon scroll in it, and we get to build it.
Okay.
And I have no clue how to do that. I have never done this before. this is it's a lot bigger in terms of like sculpture, what I'm doing. And I'm having to do it with like cardboard and then whatever scraps they have at this place. And so a lot of it I'm piecing together as I go, and the way that I'm learning how all these parts move is by doing the best to visualize it. Like even learning, since it's a sculpture and there's gonna be a head on it, I was like feeling my own jaw to see where those connections were.
Oh, okay. That's kind of, I guess you could call that learning from the self. Like you take in from your environment rather than someone directly instructing you.
Yeah, and so like having that very hands-on tactile feeling while I'm trying to do something helps me visualize it in my head a lot more than just trying to imagine it, because dear god, trying to just like get a picture in my head is so hard as is. It helps to have that visualization or a feeling of where it's going, so that way it can start to solidify itself a lot more.
Okay. Let's see. This, uh, let me think. Well, I'm still pretty new at my job. I've only been here four-ish. Been at my current place for like four-ish months now.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I'm still learning new things. We have to work with some pretty complicated, not even complicated, just obtuse programs. And like you said, learning by doing, I think, is often at least it is. I don't want to say it's the best way, but it is one of the most effective for me. And the big part of learning by doing, I guess what they call tactile learning,
Mm-hmm.
is repetition and being allowed to fuck up once in a while.
Yeah, because it happens.
Yeah.
That's just how we are as people. Um, but learning how to how to bounce back from that is also super important.
Right. And I think like if you want to talk about like school in that context, I think school struggles to strike a balance between teaching people what they need to learn and allowing for a little bit of failure. Because the grading system as is, there is some wiggle room depending, if in college especially, depending on your professor. Like you can fuck up on a test or a quiz, but sometimes it gets really Spartan out there, and that's not really conducive to learning. That's conducive to you either memorize what you need to do, and whether or not you internalize it doesn't matter, or eat shit.
Yeah, so that is a big thing with just the way that school's structured, like with these units and the way a test is formatted, is that I think they're calling them modules now, right? Like that's the more common term for it.
I think so.
But if you think of a module like in your earlier years, back in high school or like even middle school, those would just be units, pretty much, right? And the breaking down of those units. And what you're told to do
Yeah.
is like, this is what we're gonna do, this is what we're gonna learn, right? And by the end of it, you have to be able to perfectly give me this information back, and then do it again for the next one, with no like correlation to what was learned previously.
And I think it varies. I don't know. I haven't thought about the way I was taught in high school in a long time, because I was lucky in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't really struggle with with like the learning part of like elementary through high school. Like it was rarely a question of like could I do it, and more a question of if I wanted to.
Oh, that makes sense. No, I mean, I
Like
guess
I
it was always easy at least to memorize stuff for the test, but I think it's more so like the not needing to hold on to that information. So like the easiest way to go through school would be to cram, regurgitate on that test, and then repeat. And that would be
yeah,
like
yeah,
super efficient because you're just getting
and
the grade.
that works for some subjects. I think like it gets a lot harder when you get to like upper level math, and then
Hmm.
suddenly you have to like understand it conceptually. But I think sometimes math programs don't necessarily teach you to understand math as a concept. They teach it to you as rules. These are, or not as something to memorize. You don't understand. They're not necessarily showing you like the connections between these concepts, and they're just showing you how to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, it's like the idea if you have somebody memorize a multiplication table and they're able to give you that information back, but they don't know why it works like that. Like they're able to repeat that information, but they don't know the actual pattern or that connection. They weren't taught that part. Then do they really know the multiplication table, or do they just know how to read the numbers off of there?
Right. And some people will just make that connection on their own. They're lucky in that regard.
Hmm.
But then when you get to the tougher stuff, that's where people are going to struggle. That's where like algebra starts to lose a lot of people, because I think they don't understand it conceptually.
Yeah, that
They
part.
just understand numbers.
It's a lot harder to intuit that information, like those patterns that they have. Because multiplication, like it is an easier one, but once you start getting to like limits, it's harder to look at that and kind of just know like, oh, it's supposed to be this.
Yeah. I remember I was always decent at math, but the stuff I always struggled with was anything with graphing. Like I don't know why I never got that.
Yeah, and everybody has a certain struggle. I remember my math teachers, they gave me the advice like if you like statistics, you're not going to like geometry. And if you like geometry, you're not going to like statistics. And I didn't know why, but now that I've learned a bit about them both, it's like I don't know, statistics has so much variation on it. It could be this or this, and it's between this range, and the geometry is very like the shape does exactly this. And it
No,
has
I remember because I liked statistics and I didn't especially care for geometry.
I'm the same way. I
Like
love stats. I love stats.
Yeah, I had a pretty good professor though for like all my stats stuff. Well, I had more than one professor, but like the one that I learned it first with was he was good. He wasn't well liked by everyone else, but like I just paid attention and I did fine.
Yeah, there's
Um,
some teachers that are like that. They click just better for certain students.
yeah.
So I guess we could move on to the next question, like how mental conditions change learning. Um,
Oh, no, you go first. I have been talking quite a bit.
okay, so by mental conditions, it could be like a lot of things. Like it could range from like flashbulb memories, which are like caused from traumatic events. But it could also be that traumatic repression that makes you forget things. So like the different ways that it does change the learning, like it makes them repress their memories, or it makes them remember something more. It makes that imprint on that mind a lot more. And
Yes, when I think
no, go ahead.
when I think of like mental conditions that change your learning, I usually think of the most common ones: ADHD, ADD, autism, the way they affect, especially young children in a school environment. Public schools are very structured, largely because of the number of students they need to deal with. You kind of need, uh,
Mhm.
for practicality, you need that structure, but it means if their specific quirks of their personality doesn't work well with that, they're going to have trouble. They're maybe they'll act out, maybe they'll just zone out. It's and it's hard to find room for that individualization.
Because it's not really a fault of their own. Like that's just how their brains are wired, and so they need just that little bit extra attention or that little bit of extra push. And yeah, you're right. Because how many students is it to teachers now?
Uh, in freshman year of my high school, I had one that was like 36 at the beginning of the year.
That's a lot. Like that's so
It's a
many
fuck
people,
ton.
and for one person to be able to understand all those kids on that
To
basis.
manage that, even like if you're not trying to get to know them all personally, even just to like teach that effectively, that's a level of public speaking skill that not a lot of teachers are going to have unless they're experienced. And even then, that was weird. I think that teacher lucked out of it because it was in like world geography or something.
Hmm.
That's not a super complicated topic. It's just a lot of memorization. But imagine teaching a high school class of math or like or like chemistry, and there's almost 40 of them.
Yeah,
And,
that's it's
and like
huge.
this isn't college where they should have a baseline already. This is high school where they are learning this stuff and sometimes hearing about it for the very first time.
Yeah, now a lot of that is being allocated to online learning. So like they have, I wouldn't say pre-made syllabuses or syllabi, um, but like having a set things of what they need to teach already is super common. Like the Common Core in Florida,
Yeah.
having that standardization of what the teachers need to teach, so that that burden of how do I teach, or what material do I even teach these kids, isn't a burden on them. But even the
I mean,
how
online
the how of that needs to be brought from the teacher, and that's the most difficult part.
online school comes with its own issues. I remember
Hmm.
I some classes online, I was like, oh hell yeah, I don't have to go to this bullshit. And then others is like, wow, I really would like having someone I could easily ask questions.
Yeah,
Like
and
if
I've
something is very complicated, I think it's very complicated or challenging or even just a little boring. When you're on a computer, especially if you're like long distance learning, like we were a few years ago,
mhm.
it becomes very easy to just like tab away and do something else, and that cycles back into the idea of how certain mental conditions make it hard to learn in that environment.
Well, like giving
If you have
iPad kids like a tablet and being told like, hey, learn this very difficult concept for the very first time.
Yeah.
Not a lot of them are going to be able to do that because I mean, YouTube's literally two button presses and a swipe away.
Yeah, it's like I could learn physics, or I could just like, I don't know, surf Google and look at random Wikipedia pages.
Yeah, and I found like, and that's a strange thing because when I let my mind wander into those topics, I absorb that information really well.
Right.
Like I've gone into
Like,
calculus videos recently and been like, this is really cool, but I could not be bothered to have learned that stuff when I was 16. Like that was I had no space for it in my mind, honestly.
yeah, the motivation is huge when it comes to teaching someone something. If you can't get them interested, you are going to have to force it, which just it creates this, I guess you'd call it a negative feedback loop, where like you try and force it, they resist, so you have to force it more, and then they resist more. It's a whole thing.
Well, yeah, and then the rebellious teen phase too matched up with that once you hit
Right.
high school, and it's even more difficult.
And like you have, I talk a lot about STEM because that's what I majored in, but English and history have these problems too. Like if you're say teaching like high school English, and there's a kid and they're like, some of the kids might have dyslexia, that's going to make things so much harder for them, just to keep up with the reading and just to understand it on a level of someone who can just look at a page, read it normally, and then be like, okay, I get it.
Hmm. Yeah, and so that now that's a disability that affects their learning, and it's not being really accommodated for. I think it's being dealt with better nowadays than it was before.
Oh yeah, back in the day, if you sucked at school, they called you an idiot and kicked you out.
Yeah, and
Now
that was it.
there is attempts. There is attempts, and a lot of it ties into like problems, at least with the American education system, underfunding, just like a lack of good pay for staff at all levels.
Yeah, because schools, teachers are not getting paid what they deserve, unfortunately.
No, administration's not getting paid. I'm not sure. They're like
And
maybe like the people at the very top are, but that's not moving down to anyone else.
yeah, no, like the passion that's needed to teach effectively is definitely being snuffed out by the price tag of that salary.
And yeah, the salary probably wouldn't be as much of a problem if like the schools themselves. It would still not be good. Like if some people probably would balk at the idea of becoming a teacher,
Hmm.
but at least if schools were more well funded, at least they'd have what they need, even at work for their work, even if they didn't have everything they wanted in their personal life. But schools, as is like teachers, everyone hears those stories of teachers buying school supplies for their classrooms because
Hmm.
if they don't, no one else will.
Yeah, and so that's another thing, not really, I guess, a mental condition, but now like a physical condition that can affect learning, and one of them's definitely like the biggest one is, unfortunately, hunger.
Mm. Yeah, if you're hungry, you're not gonna focus as well.
Yeah, and
And
a lot of, I mean, it's very recently that there's been bills that have been declined for actually putting more funding towards like free breakfast or free lunch for kids.
yeah, it's no, I think that's super important. Like some kids are going to be coming from a home where they don't have the baseline, and if you can help them get there, that's huge. That's a huge deal, and
Yes,
they don't want them because they don't care.
because well, not that they don't care, but it's not profitable. That's more of the problem. It's gonna put them in the red. Like that is something that is uh debt to
Yeah,
them, which makes
we
sense.
don't. We
But
shouldn't ask public services to be profitable. Our first goal should be like, are these
of
helping
course,
people?
that is the first goal, and the
Like
things that do help people are not going to be profitable because they're going in to bring them up.
at least not in the short term, which is what some of the upper
Hmm.
level people care about. Like we
Exactly.
see, like over time, the effects of making sure people are fed will probably show. Oh, but you're not if you're never gonna do anything but means testing, then you're not really gonna accomplish anything.
Hmm. But no, just the fact that people perform better when they're healthy is already it's the baseline. Keep your people healthy and they do better for you.
Yeah.
And so tying that back into learning, especially for kids, yeah, it's a bummer that hunger is something that affects children so much when it comes to learning their at such a young age the most important stuff that's going to be the building blocks towards everything else
Yeah.
that they're going to learn in the future.
You know, inequality starts at birth and then it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah,
'Cause
it's a bad debuff that just keeps stacking on.
It, you could argue it starts before birth sometimes.
Yeah, that's it runs pretty deep. It's a hard cycle to break out of.
And then the ones that do, they're treated as, oh, anyone can do this, but they were lucky. They got lucky, and now they are being used to put down people who are in the same situation.
Yeah, because the way that I learned it is that level of success is a matter of two things. It's hard work, which is very necessary to get to that point, but also opportunity. And if you get the right opportunity, you jump on it. Sometimes you just shoot up. Like it stacks like that. But you need the opportunity. You do need that luck to some extent.
There's some
Especially,
people, that they can work hard their whole lives, and all they do is work themselves into a grave.
hmm yeah. Well, there was something I saw recently about this Burger King manager worked there a good over 30 years, and he was finally able to buy himself a home, because of
Yeah.
a not a GoFundMe page, but because of community funding.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even his job that got him
Like,
that after working all that time. It was just enough to keep him afloat until people were like, "Here, you know what? You deserve a house." And so
stories give me weird feelings because it is nice when it happens. I like seeing that community effort, but
of course,
that community effort exists because because if it doesn't, people just continue to wallow.
yeah. What's the classic tweet about the orphan crushing machine that you have to pay?
Yeah, the orphan crushing machine.
It's
Oh,
exactly that.
yeah. It's like nobody questions why the orphan crushing machine exists in the first place.
Yeah, just pay it money so it doesn't crush the orphans. Just keep doing that, or else like
Forever.
it's pretty, yeah. And it's pretty strange how many of those machines just kind of we let exist. I fear we've strayed very far
Yeah, a little, but like
from the original
I
topic.
feel like that. It's a podcast if you don't go horrifically off topic at some point, and then you have to like rope it back.
Yeah, no, definitely not a bad thing, but I think it is time that we rub it back.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so so what does it mean to actually learn something, you think? Like what is it? Can it be unlearned, or is it something that you just learn to not do anymore?
So I guess I'm gonna be annoying and ask a question in response to that question
Okay,
is
that's
there a
fine.
difference between learning something and understanding something? If we're still on the topic of like academia, which is where I usually think of the word learn. I know it's important in social and cultural stuff, but that's not the first thing I think of.
Well, yeah, no, definitions is definitely a good place to start here. So what is the difference between the two? I guess.
Because like people always talk about like do you know something, but do you understand it? And that's a phrase that makes sense. But as I read that when you like sent the list of questions, I was thinking like, is there a difference between learning something and understanding it?
Well, yeah, we
And
can go back
I'm
to
a little stuck on
the
that one, which is why I'm asking you.
we can go back to the example of the multiplication table. if somebody knows like the answers to it but doesn't understand multiplication, they just know that 5 times 5 equals 5 because they brute forced that specific math fact into their head.
Yeah.
It's that idea. They don't understand why. They just remember that it does. So I guess you can know that bees pollinate flowers, and you've learned that information, but you don't understand how they do it.
Or why it continues to happen after so long.
Yeah, and so I guess at that point, to truly learn that a bee pollinates flowers, I guess you'd have to go into that extent of like every single aspect of
I
it
would say
to actually
I
understand
guess I would
it.
say understanding is what happens after you have learned about enough about something. Like,
Oh,
it's transitional. Like, that's how I would say.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that.
Like, learning is not a state of being necessarily. Well, I guess it could be if you want to get real fancy with it, but it is an action that we take. It
Okay.
is when we are learning something, we are actively taking in information and trying to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And you can learn things incorrectly.
Yeah, that's where we get, and that's why you asked about like the idea of unlearning. I figured we'd get into that when you mentioned it, and people talk about like unlearning prejudices, which and when if you grow up in a culture that has them, that's something like every American I think has to go through at some point, is
Because it is
realizing the
really
world is bigger than you've
ingrained.
been told.
Like
Yeah.
some level of prejudice is contained like within every family I've seen, like within everybody.
Yeah,
There's
there is a
always
natural fear of the other.
uh-huh. There's always somewhere there's some other person that you have to be better than, or that is just worse than you by default because they are that type of person. I think that type of person varies for everybody. I know for some people it's like
Right.
musicians, they just hate anybody who plays music because it reminds them of like somebody specific or something specific.
Mm. I didn't know that was a real thing. I thought they just made that up for Coco.
No. I've seen it. Um,
Wild.
my grandma didn't like that I was picking up guitar at some point because of my grandpa who had played, and he hadn't treated her well at some point.
Ah, that sucks.
So it's things like that. It's like that reminder, like you don't want to be reminded of certain things, and that is a learned
Right.
behavior. That is a learned behavior. It's aversion.
Right. And learned behaviors come from they come from yourself, or sorry, words, I stumble. They can come from others, or they can come from your own experiences. And it's, I guess, one of the important skills that you can learn, there's that word again, is the ability to kind of look outside, look at a perspective from outside yourself. Not even necessarily from another specific individuals, but just see like, would this be reasonable if someone else did it?
Well, yeah, and that's the whole mentality thing that like we kind of work towards, is being very present in that moment, like of what you're doing, of what's happening, and what's actually going on.
And trying to see the bigger picture even when everything in the smaller one sucks.
Yeah, because we do genuinely like see a world through a filter of our emotions. Like when we're sad, things are gonna suck more often because we're sad. But that's just how we're filtering it. And so being able to step back and realize that you're doing that is a really big thing that you could do to start changing it in the other direction.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Say,
oh, go ahead.
I lost my train of thought. Go on.
So just thinking about that filter, um, to be able to see through it, because especially like anger's a big one that makes people act in ways that they wouldn't have, and it's because they're not recognizing it early enough, or they are and they're feeding into it and allowing it to run them, instead of realizing that they're getting angry for some reason and trying to find like the root of that anger and dealing with that problem. The longer
Anger
they sit
is
in that
often,
emotion, it leads them to do something irrational that they wouldn't have wanted to do.
I think anger, above most of the other emotions, is often prone to being intense and coming all at once because it's primarily, I guess you'd call it, a derivation of the feeling of being surprised. Usually when something makes you mad, it's because it came out of nowhere or in a way you did not expect, and you're like, oh, that sucks. And it when you feel that much in that short of a time frame, it I think it removes some of your ability to see that bigger picture because your emotions just overtake you.
Yeah, it creates a tunnel vision.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I know a lot about anger from personal experience. Um, and it really is easy to just to kind of feed into it and not realize that you're doing it.
It's easy to give into because like that catharsis from letting it out can be very briefly satisfying until you see the consequences, if there are any.
Yeah, and for me, well, I guess the way that it kind of filters out my experiences is like when I do experience that that aversion to something negative, um, my body will tense up, right? Like really, really hard, and it's something that I feel in my muscles first, and it's not something that can just go away. It's like a ball of energy that's just kind of sitting there, and it needs to be released,
Right.
but it's just kind of being compacted because releasing it would be like really, really bad. It would suck for everybody involved, everybody in the vicinity, and so it gets tighter because I don't want to have that explosion. But if I don't stop right then and there, it's very common that like I'll be literally unable to move because my body's just so tense trying to not burst. And
Right.
so it becomes difficult to handle in that situation. And the way that I've learned to do that is when I feel even like the slightest bit of tightness in my chest, um, I have to flip that switch. Like if I feel that, I'm like, all right, something's pissing me off. And the moment I feel that, I instantly go into investigation mode and try to figure out what it is. And most of the time, it's something really small that I can deal with by how do people say it? Getting good.
Yeah.
And just,
Yeah, that was what I was gonna say. Finding the source of anger is kind of the best way to diffuse it, and understanding not just like the exact thing that made you angry, but like why it did.
yeah.
Why are you? Why is this distressing you?
hmm And I found that to be a lot more an effective way to use that ball of energy that builds up is to just let it go to my head and let it investigate. Um, that takes a lot to do that though. It doesn't matter like how early I catch it or how late I catch it. It's a lot to flip that switch. It's like
Yeah,
it's like trying to shoulder flip a sumo wrestler. But I guess that so moving on to the next one, like what are important things that you've learned? So going through that was pretty much my thing. That's like one of the biggest things that's helped me keep a clear mind.
I mean, like things we've learned about the learning process, or just like in general.
Just in general, like what are some of the biggest things that have stuck with you?
Let me think. I've lived like 20 odd years. That's
That's
quite a
enough for
lot of time
some.
to learn things.
That's enough for some green wisdom.
Yeah. Uh,
Fucking 30 years from now, we'll
I'd
come back
say
and realize we were still like learning about. We still had a lot more to learn.
the most important thing I think anyone can learn is that shit is always going to happen. It's always things will always go wrong. Things will always be at some point everything will seem like it is over. There's no point in like keeping on, but the thing I try and keep in my head is as long as you are still breathing, it's not over. You know, there's maybe you won't get exactly what you wanted, but you can keep you know everything's over, but you're still breathing. So what's next?
So it's not over yet because
It's
you're
never
still
over.
breathing.
Yeah, and I think when especially when you're younger, everything feels so big. Everything is such a big deal, and some kids are good at processing that. I was not. Uh, and it takes a long time to learn to be okay with things not being okay.
Yeah, that one's definitely the hardest part. Because I like that. I said this last episode too. I'm probably gonna mention it a lot more. But the yin and yang and how it represents that that idea of pleasure and suffering. That if you look at each one black and white as pleasure and suffering, right? Um, in the vastness of the white, there's going to be a small bit of the black inside of it. So for like all the pleasure that you feel, at some point it's going to end, and you will be disappointed by that.
And
But
you
at the
need to learn how to go with the flow.
but yeah, at the end of it, it is a flow because if once you're in that state of dissatisfaction and you're in that black part, at the end of it, there's pleasure when it's over. And so it's this idea that you're always going to be going around in this circle. Like something good for you is going to end, and you're going to feel bad about it for a good amount of time. But at the end of that, you're going to go back and you're going to grow. And as people, we should decide to become bigger and lose less as we go through those cycles.
What's that phrase? Roll with the punches. I'm very fond of it.
Yeah, it's hard because it does suck when you're getting punched.
Right. But
But
you learn how to make it suck less.
yeah, and eventually there's an end to all of them. Like you're not gonna get punched forever, and you have your turn.
Yep.
But going with the flow is pretty difficult because sometimes it does feel like the flow has it out against you. Like that flow is definitely something
Yeah.
pretty rough sometimes, and it's hard to not want to resist that.
Right. But as long as you're breathing, the flow might change.
So, hmm, I'm not gonna lie. I want to, and this is a spoiler because I can't find a way to tie it in right now. But spoiler for
You can do
later on
whatever
in
you
this
want.
conversation. I want to bring up One
Yeah.
Piece because I'm talking with you,
Oh fuck yeah!
and I want to bring up One Piece at some point, but I don't know how to tie it in yet. And I'm thinking of mentors.
Well, that's a big part of learning is who you learn from, right? And
Yeah,
the people who teach you are just as are extremely important to how you learn and what you learn.
and I think stories are a really good way to show that because stories we learn from them all the time. Like that's why I love not anecdotal
Yeah.
evidence. Like if you're in a court, don't give that as a reason.
Oh
But
no.
in conversation, it's so good because you're learning from somebody else. It's the most human connection you can have with somebody, like learning from somebody else's experience.
Uh, I I mean, that's why like some of the oldest stories, surviving stories, are like, they have morals and stuff, and they're like, oh, they were told to kids, like Aesop's fables. That's huge. All for every pretty much every single one of those has like some sort of lesson, and it's because having that ability to connect with the lesson makes it easier to internalize.
Yeah, and those messages can get really, really complicated. But stories help with telling them so well because you can connect with the people inside of them. In a well told story.
Yeah,
Um,
and having that connection kind of helps you get that experience of, how we mentioned that the ability to look outside yourself to understand your feelings. You can kind of experience that by proxy because you
yeah,
are essentially watching someone else experience them.
it's the empathy, pretty much. It's like empathic learning.
I always forget the difference between empathy and sympathy until I look it up.
Empathy is the one that's
'Cause
like you're directly connecting. And sympathy is just kind of it would be like condolences. Like you're sorry it
okay,
happened, but empathy would be like genuinely feeling it
you've been
yourself.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, being able to connect with what somebody else has done through those stories is one of the one of the easiest ways humans learn things.
Think. Let's see. If we want to talk, well, I want to go one more thing. I do want to say, like, on important things we've learned, I would like to do one on the learning process,
Uh-huh.
which is just that learning how you learn things is kind of something you have to do on your own through trial and error, which is a scary thing to try and do because sometimes you're not really given the room to fail. You just kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah, but I think by allowing yourself to get thrown in there, you'll be able to scope out how you're gonna take it on.
Yeah.
So by giving yourself that chance to try and understand what's going on, you'll learn how to get it. You'll learn how to understand it.
You figure it out if only because you don't have another choice.
Yeah, a lot of the times you kind of don't. I can't tell you how many jobs I've been thrown into where they're like we're kind of sinking here. So can you do something about it? I'm like, all right, bet I'll try. I'm just in high school, by the way, at that time, and being told to figure out like just how to run the business better or how to make it flow better.
All right.
And it's just really strange because I was really young at that time and I didn't really know how to do it. I just kind of pretended like I did, and it felt right. And now that I realize, like looking back at it, I didn't fuck up enough to like get fired. I didn't fuck up enough
Oh, there you
to
go.
get like warned or anything. And so I was like, okay, so maybe I didn't do like the best. I didn't do great, but I did it. I stayed. I maintained it, and that's what mattered.
Yeah. You're still there, so you can keep going.
Exactly. And until I quit that job and had to get another one, like what I had learned there, I maintained. That work ethic that I had um, grew with me, and the more I kept with that, the easier it was to learn new things at other jobs. And so yeah, I figured out how I learn things, and now I'm able to pick up on them a lot easier when I go in and try them.
That self familiarity is very nice to have.
Yeah, because a lot of people not understanding themselves is like the root of a lot of issues, especially the most internal ones.
Yeah. Let's see. This. How would you describe like your journey, I guess, in like figuring that out? Do you think that started when you were like thrown into that stuff with work, or did you think like did you figure it out earlier?
I figured it out a lot later, actually,
Mm.
because at the time, and I'm not gonna lie, so I found at that time I was working at Pizza Hut, right? And
Yeah.
I was doing a few things. I was doing that, and I was doing community college full time. And
Oh no.
one of the classes I was taking was poetry because I really liked the
Oh,
professor
cool.
that was in it. She was kind of bad, not gonna lie, and she was a good teacher, and I was really interested in English. I wanted to be an English teacher at the time, and I was really diving into a lot of literature because that's what I wanted at the time, and I don't want that anymore. But I was so invested that I took a poetry class.
Yeah.
And so we were told to keep a notebook, and every week we had to fill out 10 pages, um,
With what?
with poetry, or
Oh
analysis on
god, that's hard.
poetry. So based on like what we
Oh.
read on the class, like we can write a poem based off a poem, and then write why our poem ties into that, or like our thoughts on it. That was a good portion of them. So it wasn't pure poetry of our own, but I did do a lot of personal stuff because she said kind of use it as a journal, and that was the first time I got to journal. And there is a lot of angst in
Okay.
that. I was pissed off at that time, dude. I was fucking miserable. Like a lot of it's funny, silly stuff, trying to keep my mood up. But then there's just like
Yeah.
passages of just me rambling about. It's just me bitching, pretty much, for like a whole page.
Yeah.
And
That's what a
so
lot of classic literature is. Having your
no, and
it's like
I fed into it because I let it just be, and so I looked at it now, and I'm like, damn, this is kind of cringy. I misspelled a lot of letters, a lot of words. I misspelled a lot of words. I tried writing in cursive again, so some of it's still cryptic to me. I'm still trying to figure that shit out.
you're deciphering it like the Voynich manuscript.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck was I trying to say here, dog? Um,
I've had my share of writing poetry, but like I never had I didn't have to do a ton of it for school except in like creative writing in
yeah,
high school, which was barely a class. But I got into it on my own time, and I just kind of wrote stuff when I felt like it.
yeah, and it is fun. It is fun to feed into it because I think being able to do turn any moment into like poetry would make it meaningful to you, and that's what's really important.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's so I was looking at that and looking back at my experience with it, and then I was like, oh, because like I was put in this bad situation, right? I felt like the only way I could really like scream about it was by writing there. Um, and I didn't really embed the fact that I learned my work ethic there. I just made that a part of my personality because I felt like it was the only real way to stay grounded at the time. Because if I was really, really good at work, at least I was good at something. And I was picking up in that poetry that I felt like I was good at nothing else but that.
Mm.
And so that's what I picked up on it. And I've made that a like proud point of my life for a really long time because being good at work is definitely what I'm good at. I am so fucking good at working, dude. I can work all day long. Like, for real. I remember um back in high school I was working construction over a summer with my dad. Well, not
The
with my
fuck?
dad.
All right, sure. Okay.
But yeah, um he was in a different company, but he's the one that got me the summer job. It was between my junior and senior year. And I remember the guys had to tell me like, "Hey, taking a lunch is mandatory. Um you can't just skip it." And I kind of just skipped it because I didn't realize what time it was. I was just out there working until it was fucking almost time to go.
Hmm.
And I would just do my shit. I would
I'm a
drink
terrible
water.
worker.
No, I can just do that shit. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess in my poetry, I realized that I held on to that. And at the time, it was a very unhealthy type of attachment. I have a very healthy attachment to that idea now.
No, I'm lazy as shit. I'm a terrible worker. I show up, I clock in, and then when it's time to go home, I'm not doing anything extra. I'm leaving. Bye. I'm here to get my paycheck and leave.
No, I mean, me too. I don't work outside the hours if I don't have to. Um, that's funny. I'm definitely like that in my real life. I have my work life a lot more put together than everything else. Um, but no, I definitely learned all that stuff about myself a lot later. Because at the time I was just not a complete person, I felt like. And I ended up having to find a lot more of those parts of me by diving into my work. Because that was the part that was the time where my mind was the clearest. When I was just doing my busy work, my mind could wander, and it would allow me to meditate on those problems and meditate on my learning experiences. And so that's where I found my clarity. And eventually I got to where I'm at now, and I'm still learning new stuff, but I think that's how it started.
Well, I don't think you ever stop learning. I think that's another big thing is nobody should ever think they are done.
There's always something more.
Yeah.
No, and I love that. I think curiosity shouldn't be just like a childlike thing. It should be extended to the moment you die. You should be curious about all things around you.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess that's something I've learned from Curious George. Um,
Yo, my goat. Like,
I'm not gonna lie. So, thinking about stories, tying that into to this next question, how does learning change at different times in life? I'm gonna say one way that it stayed the same is definitely through like TV. Like I would watch a lot of PBS growing up, and so it was nothing but educational programs there. And even now, um, when I'm on YouTube, I'll be watching just videos on math and physics because that's what's entertaining to me. It's fun to watch.
I listened to this one historical podcast called Behind the Bastards. I like it a lot. It's like learning can be very fun, but it's hard. It's a hard thing to force.
Hmm. But yeah, and every stage of my life, I feel like watching that type of content has definitely geared my brain towards absorbing information and being able to learn it.
And it's how things change. Is for me is kind of it gets a lot less structured as you get older, and you are in theory trusted more to handle it yourself and to like know what you're doing. Like in uh like yeah, even just high school versus college. High school they kind of hold your hand a lot. but in college, you just kind of like, all right, you know it or you don't. If you don't, too bad.
Yeah, that's on
And
you.
it's a weird pressure. And then at work, it's at least at my current job, it's kind of like everyone kind of learns stuff from each other because it's just more practical that way. There's no reason to like get on someone for not knowing something because you all have stuff to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a big part of a work culture that can increase productivity too. That not constantly berating people for the things that they've done wrong. Because I feel like there's a lot of companies that do have systems that focus a lot more on punishment than they do on not letting the mistakes slide, but creating learning moments from those mistakes and creating an environment where people teach each other. They focus more on punishing for getting things done wrong. What kind of is that? Negative reinforcement?
Yeah. Well, if you're punished for making mistakes, that is absolutely negative reinforcement. And you are intentionally creating you are my words. You hmm. You are creating a negative association with making mistakes, which means people don't take risks and they don't try anything that they aren't sure they can do.
Yeah, and being in that risky area is exactly where learning happens.
Hmm.
Or it's not the only place learning happens, but it does. I mean, it's how do I explain that better? It's not the only way that people learn from mistakes. Like it doesn't have to be negative reinforcement. There's the idea that if shit, I need an example. I need to pull something up. Because at my current job right now where we're at, if somebody does something too bad with money, like that's their bottom line. Like you're pretty much screwed for that. But that makes sense because it's their money. But when it comes to other situations, especially for the management section, there's room for question and confusion because they understand what it's like to be at that level. Where it's thrown in, where we're kind of thrown into a lot of what the hell is going on situations.
Yeah. And that kind of ties back into the people who teach you. You want people who understand where you are and what you're experiencing, and people who are going to respect that.
Yeah, so having like a mentor at that level is like super important.
Yeah.
And somebody to guide that growth. That I feel like that's the reason that I've grown at this job a lot more than I have at the other ones. Because they at the other ones they didn't really have mentors. They were like, hey, we're gonna have you do this thing that you've never done before, and this person's gonna teach you. And then the person that was gonna teach you was too busy, but that thing's still gotta get done. And so you gotta figure it out. And so being thrown into that situation versus having somebody who like who's actually like there for you during emergencies is has created a very different environment for for learning how to grow in like this business that I'm working in. I have to be very vague because I don't want to give company names. I feel like that's
No, I get it. I get it. I don't want to give away too much.
yeah.
Leave a little mystery for everyone.
Yeah, for the people who know, they know. Unfortunately, it wasn't vague enough. Yeah, guidance is such an important part of learning. We were talking about mentorship earlier.
Yeah.
What are different guides that you've had like throughout your life?
Oh, the first one you get, like, ideally, is your parents. They're the ones who teach you the
Mhm.
very basics of like how to function, and they show you like how to interact with strangers, how to behave when you're in public, how to like do the very basic things to take care of yourself. And ideally, they should be there, as long as they can be to help you out.
Yeah.
After that, your teachers are going to be your mentors are going to be your teachers usually. Maybe it'll be like an older sibling or some other family member, someone who can teach you how to it teach you different. You learn different things. Like you learn not just from older authority figures, but also from your peers. You learn how to deal with different kinds of people who are on your level and that you can't really just do anything about.
Well, I think on a like in a way that differs is the way that we talk, because I know that the way that I talk with my family definitely varies with the way that I'll talk with like different people in a business setting or different people or like with my friends sometimes
Yeah.
because it's just it is a different environment. It's a different culture. My mom didn't doesn't I think she still doesn't understand. Maybe she does what swag is. But at
I'm not sure
like
I entirely get it either.
but
I was not good at communicating with my peers when I was younger.
no, I didn't. I understood what it meant. I thought it was pretty dumb. I wasn't about it, but I at least looked into the meanings of words that I heard. And they just weren't words that I would hear at home because the words I hear at home were Spanish.
Yeah.
And so I would pick up a different type of slang from my peers. And so I would learn different words depending on my environment. And it's it's things like that change because of where we're at.
Yeah. Our environment is,
Mhm.
there's a lot of books written on like the idea of nature versus nurture, what determines who a person is and who they become. And I've always been a boring middle of the road guy. Like, yeah, there is who you are, but where you grow up, who you are taught by, who you live around, these things have drastic effects on you.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's everything that's around you. It is a combination of both. But nature is just like as you're born, right?
Yeah,
I don't know
like
because that's
I
already
guess
a
when they
tricky
talk about
answer to answer. Like that's tricky to give a definition to.
like nature, I think they mean like what it like an inherent thing that like a quality that is supposed to be inherent to you as a person, and then which goes into like the idea of essentialism, which is a whole other thing.
Well, but let's talk about it. Is
Oh hell, okay.
the
Essentialism, if I remember correctly, is the idea that everything has something specific that makes it that thing. That specific thing that makes it that thing is immutable and unchanging. And the idea is, someone has their nature, that is who they are at their core, that does not change. And then there's nurture, the environment they grow up in, the people that teach them, the experiences they have.
Hmm, that's interesting. I know I've heard about it, but I've never like looked into the definition of it.
Have you read Beastars? There's a lot on nature versus nurture in that.
The Stars, I've read a really good amount of it. I haven't finished it.
It's kind of like that's like I guess you'd call it like the main theme, because you have Lugosi, who is kind of by his by his nature, at least what you would presume to be his nature, he should be this aggressive, powerful individual, but he isn't. He is timid and polite. He's all these things, and then you have Lewis, the deer guy, and
Mhm.
then he by his nature, by that idea, yeah, in society says his nature should be more docile. Oh, but it isn't. He has grown up to be someone uh, someone who is commanding.
Yeah, more aggressive. But okay, so my question is though, is that their nature or did they learn that? Because from what I know,
Mm.
Lugosi learned from his grandfather a lot later on that he was that to be more reserved because man, I don't want to get into much spoiler territory, but for this story,
Yeah.
but how long ago did this end?
I don't know. I'm not that far in actually. I'm on like chapter 40 or something.
Ah, man, I
But
can't. I don't want to get into too much, but uh, when it gets into their backgrounds, it's very apparent that they had to be like that because of where
to
they,
survive,
yeah, in order to survive as they were to continue living for Legoshi, he was taught to live more under the radar. Um, I maybe
that would
his
be
like,
nurture.
yeah, that was nurtured. So maybe now we think it's a part of his nature to be that, but it stemmed from nurture.
Yeah,
Even Louis, his backstory, he had to fight. He was,
that I do remember. Yeah,
yeah, and so he had to be like that, and so that became a part of his nature a lot later. But that's because nurture, which is a very aggressive way to put it, unfortunately, but his environment nurtured him to be that way.
yeah. And nature versus nurture is ultimately like a concept debating on like what determines who you become.
So which one? But which one is natured? Because what's the definition of that? Because I feel like that changes because that was learned behavior. What we're considering their nature was still learned behavior. Nature should just be inherent,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, nature is inherent. There's and it might be playing with the idea of like what we believe to be their nature and how their personalities kind of contrast with what we think they would normally be.
Practice. So this is from Merriam-Webster saying the
Go for it.
practice of regarding something such as a presumed human trait as having innate existence or universal validity rather than as being a social, ideological, or intellectual construct. So having an
Was that
innate
the definition?
existence. Everything has that innate
Yeah,
existence. So everything, yeah, everything has something that it's like meant to be as,
right.
rather than being a social, ideological, or intellectual construct. So attaching that idea to like Legoshi, then he's
Yeah. By his nature, we meet a lot of the other predators, and they kind of
mhm.
behave how you would expect. Heck, we have the uh, those tiger guys, I think, or were they lions? I don't remember.
The Shishigami.
I think so. It's been a while since I've read it.
If it's the mafia guys you're talking about, it's the lions. Yeah, Shishigami.
Yeah, those guys. They behave like we would expect anthropomorphized predators to do so. And when Lugosi changes, does become aggressive, it's kind of this big departure from how we know him. I feel like I've lost the thread on what I was trying to say at some point.
No, so he does change at some point because I remember he starves himself for a while, doesn't he? Like he deprives himself of meat and then he becomes stronger through that or something. Because of his, I want to say it's because of the like how strong his will was. transferred into his physical strength. But I'm not sure. I remember his fur turned like white.
I don't remember. Trying to think where I left off, but I legit don't remember. But I guess.
So one thing that I have learned, I want to try back to the important things that I've learned.
Yeah, go for it.
More recently is resilience and what that means. Because I don't know, a lot of times I felt like resilience was like something really rigid. It meant I had to be solid and like really I don't know how to say it, just like straight, structurally sound. And that felt impossible to keep up. And it kind of just is. I can't like one stuff damn. There's so many words with S's in my mind. I'm starting to slip up.
Yeah.
Once it does start up, and things get thrown at me, it's hard to stay rigid. I'll start to topple over. And so that
Well, the thing is,
when my idea of resilience was to try to stay still and stay strong, I would always fall. And
no one is strong forever, after all.
yeah, exactly. And oh no, you made that rhyme.
It's like sometimes uh I'll learn to just take an L and then wait until you can get back up.
Well, no, not even that. I changed what my idea of resilience was. I made it into
Okay.
into rubber. It moves with it. It absorbs it. It feels it, and it's able to eject it out. It's able to take it out. It's to go like once again to go with the flow, and to shoot back with it just as hard as it came in. Right, like like a mistake hits you, and it's like something really hard. Like I don't even know what to say in this case. Last biggest one I started to learn from was my last relationship. Once that fell through, bro, I had a lot of learning to do on that one. That's
Yeah.
I had a lot of things to fix up.
It's a hell of a learning experience.
Yeah, and that I could say that's one thing that like hit me really hard, and I had to shoot just as hard back. I had to take it, feel it, and like really understand what happened to be able to bounce back and be back to myself again. And I don't know. The way that I learned that, like I said, I've always learned through TV shows and through movies. Was by the boy who ate the gum gum fruit.
Yeah.
Like out of everybody who could have taught me that, like he's represented that symbol so much. Like he is the most resilient son of a bitch ever. He's my favorite protagonist.
And he takes all the pain, but he keeps smiling.
Yeah.
And that helps him help other people who have struggled with that. Yeah. As you meet the Straw Hats one by one, you see they are defined by misfortune time and time again, and he helps them overcome that.
Yeah, and I always love the idea of characters that do that. Not he does learn things, but for the most part, he's the one that people grow around.
Yeah. Luffy is mostly a static character. Not entirely. He does grow throughout the series. But he kind of acts as a pillar for the series to revolve around.
Yeah,
as the world changes, there is a constant.
Yeah, he's like a catalyst for change, like no matter where he goes, for everybody around him.
And I really love that he's got this very childlike view of the world. That but that ultimately means he will do the right thing. He won't stand by and watch someone get hurt. He won't let you do wrong things for no reason. I need it. Hold on. There's a quote I've been thinking about now. I'm gonna find it. You do whatever you want.
All right, bet. No, that is something that I really love about him. Another thing that I love about him is how he does like he throws people into the deep end like constantly for their stuff. Uh, just so they really know where they're coming from when they're asking for his help. To know that like having his help is like a true symbol of his friendship. Like he's not gonna let them down. He's gonna do everything he can for them because that's his friend. And I love the simplicity of that. It's so easy for him to look at his friend who's having trouble with something and do everything he can to help him. Yeah, go ahead and quote it.
It's like it's a meditation by someone named Tzvi Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
It is what is it that the child has to teach? The child naively believes that everything should be fair and everyone should be honest, that only good should prevail, and that everybody should have what they want and there should be no pain or sadness. The child believes the world should be perfect and is outraged to discover it is not. And the child is right.
Oh, I love that.
I'll send it I'm gonna paste it into the thing.
Okay, bet.
See.
Tzvi Freeman.
I cannot pronounce that.
Tzvi
Freeman, maybe?
I think it's Tzvi. It's Tzvi. I'm not entirely sure. That seems right. I need to learn that. But yeah, that's really, I love that a lot. Because there is a simplicity to it. Like it should be that simple. It should be that easy.
Yeah. And I always think about that when I'm what is it? When I'm like thinking about like the themes of One Piece as a series. Mm-hmm. It's you have this character in kind of a broken world who sees past that and sees what it can be. You know, he sees the wonder, he sees the joy.
Yeah, I haven't watched all the way up. I know a lot of more stuff. Like I know up to Whole Cake Island. I know what happens in Wano.
No, I'm only on like Thriller Bark. Don't even worry.
But I've only really watched up to past Skypia.
Oh, and I love Skype.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And that arc was the pinnacle of that for me, because he would not stop telling these people to just keep dreaming. Like it was that easy. Like to everybody he went to, he was like just yes. That was it.
Scene with fucking Blackbeard. It's so good. And it's like Blackbeard, as far as I can tell, Blackbeard's gonna be like the main villain, but he has the same like outlook on the world as Luffy does.
That's what's gonna make it really interesting, honestly, at the end of the day. But yeah,
I love
that part. That was when they got beat, right? Because they went to the pirates there, and they're like, "Hey, what's the way to Skype?" And they all laughed at them. And then they kept laughing at them despite their belief, and they got beat the crap out of, right? They just let them.
Right.
And they just let it happen because they were like, we're not wrong. we're trying to find a way to this place, and you guys are laughing at us.
And I guess it's another big life lesson is sometimes you gotta let people be wrong. It's not always worth the fight.
Yeah, like that's embarrassing to them because they're doing all that and they're not even right. They're living in ignorance, in a veil of ignorance in that case. And so yeah, when they meet up with Blackbeard and the dreams never end, and they get to go eventually find their way to there, all the way up to the bell. That wasn't. But we're back to the learning side of the podcast. To the fuck. I don't know where to start off from. Where were we? I was talking about One Piece. I remember that.
Yeah, we were on the golden rifle,
The golden,
like at the end where they ring the bell.
yeah, where they hit the bell. And
Yeah.
through the ringing the bell, just being able to show everybody, like in the story, like he made it. Like that
Yeah.
myth from years ago wasn't just a myth; it was something that actually happened.
And they carry the dreams of people long gone on, and they carry them to the end.
Yeah, what's JoJo's Part
So
5,
good.
Golden Wind.
Yeah.
There's that same theme too.
It's like the hope of people long gone doesn't just disappear if you carry it with you.
Yeah. I think another culture that has that is in Mexico with Dia de los Muertos, where the people don't die until they're forgotten by everybody on Earth. They're still carried on by their memory, by their stories, by the people who still live.
Yeah. It is as the great poet Macklemore once said, "You die twice. Once when they bury you in the grave, and the second time is the last time that somebody mentions your name."
That's Macklemore?
Yeah, that's from a Macklemore.
That goes hard.
That's from Glorious, I think. Look, you don't understand. You're talking to the only Macklemore fan on the planet.
The biggest Macklemore fan on the planet for sure. Oh, that's funny. I know I could start um what I can start doing Can't Hold Us with you anytime I want.
Yeah.
Which is the funniest thing to do when we're hanging out. I love it.
Uh, like you could also do that with like the old Pokemon ciphers, some of them. Like I used to have that memorized back to front almost.
Really? That's interesting.
The 2013 and 2016 ones I had like memorized fully at one point in my life.
I never really listened to those. I think the only Pokemon cipher I listened to was your entry.
I had so much fun. I need to like write more stuff because that was so much fun.
Yeah, no, do it for sure. It's a lot of fun to just write. Even like I was talking about earlier, where like you can't get an idea of what the final product's gonna be in your head. Like for me, and so seeing it form out or just writing words will eventually let me piece together what it should look like, even if the words that I put down now kind of suck.
Yeah, everything's a process.
Exactly. Yeah, until you're happy with it.
Yeah. Although in my experience, I can't remember the last time I met an artist who was happy with their work.
Oh no, I understand that completely. It feels like there's always a little bit something that could be improved, like another brush stroke.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes we just got to be like, that's enough. Right there is good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're always trying
It's
to.
like for me, if like when I finish something, it's like I can't fucking do this anymore. Moving on.
That's funny. I'm a
I guess
perfectionist.
that's
What?
another big lesson to learn is when to cut your losses.
Yeah. When do you do that? Because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I try to get everything like just right where it needs to be. I've learned to let go of that a bit.
It's just kind of for me. It's just kind of It's something I just kind of learned it naturally. I'm not sure when I picked it up, but the idea that like at some point you just gotta You got to look at what you have done, what is left, and think, is the end product going to be worth it? Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. I've never thought about a situation like that. I've always thought like, I guess in the situation of like a timeline that I didn't really know where the end was.
Yeah.
I would always keep
Sometimes you
trying to
gotta
build it.
learn to be okay with good enough.
Yeah, because good enough works most of the time.
Good enough is good enough.
Yeah. Oh, especially with stuff that like we're doing for the first time or like the first few times even, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to just get a hang of things.
Also, when you're doing something for the first time, you don't really know where good enough is yet. Like I think like once you get experience with trying something, uh, and you've done it a couple times, you kind of get where your own level of satisfaction is is enough.
Yeah, I feel like you get so when it comes to work, I feel like you get a different amount of that kind of agency depending on like the level that you're at. Like the amount of responsibility and the amount of leeway you're given to fulfill those responsibilities increases every rank you go up.
Yeah, like at my current job, we have a pretty good amount of freedom. Like we have expectations. Like when we're writing reports, when we're doing an EA, there is an expectation of there's a template we run off of, and we
Uh-huh.
don't really alter that. And there's certain guidelines for formatting. But then like when we're out in the field, it's just get it done.
Yeah.
You know, there is like a minimum baseline that the BLM is like, you want to be walking a mile an hour, or I think that's like the minimum. But that's usually pretty easy. It's pretty rare that terrain is that bad, that it would actually take you that long.
But they
But
always have like some kind of
when I'm out in the
standard for you
field, I
guys.
can just, as long as I get it done.
No, that makes sense. I feel like that's kind of what I have in a different way, where it's I'm given this area kind of like a kitchen and told to make it run with the schedule that I have and the people that I have.
Yeah,
And there's certain rules for how to get this stuff to make it run. But I myself have the freedom to get it wrong and fuck it up completely.
yeah,
Or like,
because you're probably the one who cleans it up anyway if
yeah.
stuff goes wrong.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, and I even because I'm not just managing now, I'm managing managers, which is weird. And so having experience at those levels, I have a standard for what each one should do. And like on a shift, the idea is now like if you're a shift manager, your idea is that what happens on your shift goes smoothly. You're responsible for that shift, right?
Yeah,
And so having that split, meaning that like the responsibilities that I give those managers, they should be giving those to the people that are working, like I don't want to give too much away, to the people that are
yeah,
working on the shift with them, the workers on the shift. And so they need to make sure that it gets done. And if it doesn't get done by them, they need to ensure that it does the next time, but they need to finish that. And if they don't finish that, I got to make sure they actually finish that. Because if they don't finish that and I don't finish it, then we all get in trouble for it. And so it's
but
I'm
someone's
the
got to get it done.
yeah. Someone's got to get it done, and if I fail to account for it, it falls on me. And so my job is to make sure that everything that needs to get done is is getting done by the people who are working there when they're working. That's what my job has become. It's really interesting because I've done every level from that, and so seeing how the
Yeah.
responsibilities change and the amount of like leeway, like now I'm allowed to go to the store and get fresh vegetables for this place, dude. I wasn't able to do that
Oh,
before.
that's
I
good.
couldn't
That's
make that
cool.
call. And it's a different, it's not a big deal, but it's a different level of responsibility that they're given. And I feel like at
Yeah.
every job they have that. There's a standard that you must meet, and then the way that you meet it must be done through that standard. But get it done in whatever way you can.
It's like the more you get more responsibility, but you also get more freedom to
Hmm.
kind of do it your own way, do it on your own pace, as long as you get it done.
Yeah, I feel like that opens up the most um for the mind to do the best problem solving for that situation that they're given. Because having all that freedom to make it run, now I'm able to do a bunch of different things, and I'm able to understand all these different things as well, and I'm able to orchestrate it, and I'm able to put it together, and that feels pretty satisfying to get done because it's not too difficult either, at least at the level I'm at. But being able to, I guess, oversee all that is how I say that, it's like expanding how much of the business I'm seeing. It's really cool to have that perspective change over time.
Yeah, it's like you begin to gain a better understand. You gain a better understanding of the people who were once on the next rung above you, and so on and so forth as you move up.
Hmm.
You kind of you understand, a bit more about them as you see how they handled it, whether they did so well or not.
Yeah, and that goes back to the mentorship too, because I get a lot of advice from from somebody who was also a manager there at some point, and so that helps a lot with my situation because now um I feel a lot less shitty about being unsure about situations because they've affirmed me that they were unsure about things at some point as well. It's just what happens at this job because there's so many things that happen there. It's impossible to have a guidebook that will tell you how to handle it all. Though common sense should be the very first thing. But if that fails you, there's people there to help with it. Yeah, that ties a lot into to once again the way that I learn. I have to be in it. I have to be feeling it, around it, and understanding it so that I can get that good, that proper comprehension.
Yeah. I guess I've been trying to learn a lot of tech stuff lately because I started streaming and making videos, and I've always struggled with computers. So like finding my own way through that has been fun.
Yeah, because it's like
Uh,
the more you know about computers, the more you're able to add to your stream.
well, and also the more I know that I don't know. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
there's a bunch of stuff.
But,
Computer science is
but
fun, but it's not for me right now. But it's definitely an interesting area of study.
yeah,
How's it going? Like, what are new things that you've added to your stream recently?
I have. I have like a little PNG tuber guy now. I drew him myself because I'm a cheap motherfucker, and I didn't want to pay someone for a model, and I didn't want to have to like learn how to use Live 2D yet. Like I'll learn it someday, and I'll get like a real like model that moves as I do. But I'm fine with like my little skeleton man.
Does he doesn't have any type of movement?
Oh, he like opens and closes his mouth. I had to like draw two poses.
That's so. How do you get it to change between the two? Okay.
It's a little application that like detects it, and then when it detects noise, it goes to one pose, and when it's quiet, it stays in the default.
Oh, okay. That's an
It's
interesting way
it's
to do
it's
it
neat.
because it's not
It's
using
neat, and
face
it more
cam.
importantly free.
Uh-huh.
That's the most important thing of all.
Because I
And
would
I've
have
been
wanted to wire
doing
it through face cam, but that's another way to do it.
Yeah, most people like when you see people with like the nicer models and the ones that like move as they move and blink as they do, it's because they
Yeah,
have a camera and they use an application for that.
yeah.
And
But this is definitely a really good way to do it, at least to start off.
yeah,
What do they say that
it's
that
it's it's chill. I'm learning DaVinci Resolve too. I just do some very
uh
basic like little snipping stuff,
yeah,
but it does make me feel very fancy.
yeah, DaVinci Resolve has a nice interface. It's feels really smooth to
It
look at.
does. Yeah. Like all I'm doing is like cutting out little 30-second sections from my from my videos. I'm like, ooh, call me the fucking neuromancer.
Just picking out clips.
Yeah. Well, I should be doing that. I'm not because I don't want to sit through like an hour and a half of footage for 2 minutes because I don't remember where things happen.
Every time I try to tell myself, I'll press the clicker. I'll press the clicker that leaves a timestamp, but I don't. And I'm like, okay, so I'll write it
Yeah.
down,
Oh,
and
you
then I
can do
don't.
that?
Uh,
I don't know. I don't know how to do that shit.
there is one somewhere. I know, I just don't know where it is, and I haven't bothered to
I don't
make
know.
it.
I actually just had to clear out a bunch of old VODs from my storage in my computer, because like my storage was full.
Yeah, these things rack up pretty fast. I didn't know that
Yeah, I got to start getting rid of stuff.
when I started. I didn't know like how quickly that would actually pack up. Like I figured it would because it just makes sense. You're saving a lot of video and a lot of raw video too.
Yeah.
But Jesus, it
Once
is a
I
lot.
well, no, like I have like this video is like 8 GB because it's an hour and a half. I was like, oh yeah, no, okay, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, no,
But I
those rack
cleared
up
out a bunch of
quick.
that, and I'm gonna start like going through them to see like, okay, what do I want to keep? What can I like trim down and then like get good clips out of.
Kind of like spring cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Let's see.
That the
And then I want to learn how to do like little effects too, and but I'm not too worried about that.
I
And
think DaVinci Resolve is like a really good application for that.
yeah, it's it's quite nice.
Yeah, I remember using it for a bit, but the interface was really massive for me at the time. I didn't understand what I was doing. I stuck
Now
to
I just learned how to do like the one thing I was looking to do, and then I was just like, all right, that's enough for now. Again, we're going back to good enough.
yeah, that makes sense. It feels I guess it felt very different for me, and I was more comfortable with other editing software I was already using. But it is a pretty good app, and you could do a lot with it.
Yeah.
Um, But I think streaming's like a good way to learn a lot of new things, especially like you said, not being that good with computers because like once again, the more you learn about DaVinci, the more you're gonna be able to change about your avatar, the more you're gonna be able to add to the
Yeah.
quality of your
Well,
stream.
no, I made my avatar in Photopea. Again, cheap.
Yeah, but it works.
But like it does. I made my stream background in I don't have much of a background right now. I have like plans for more assets I'm going to make. I just don't feel like it.
But no, at some point, definitely go for it because the I think when it comes to treating something like a job or like a making work out of a passion, um, the
Yeah.
important thing is that you're always happy trying to add more to it or trying to do more
Right.
because it is the thing that makes you happy. And so ultimately enjoying the job is the more important thing than the work that comes out of it because the work that comes out of it should just be good on its own because you're putting that good into it.
Yeah. I'm not super what's the word? I'm not super concerned about like turning this into a job. If it happens, I'll do it. But if not, I'm just like I'm fine with it being a hobby.
No, well, I guess job's not the right word, but work is the right word. Like
A
the
career, yeah, work is probably the
like work as an
and it
effort.
is effort. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is effort. That's not a lot. I think like, oh, my videos are only like 20 minutes. I could probably knock out like 5 of these in a day. And it's like, no,
But
no, you
no,
fucking can't.
I've
It's
had
like,
like an hour's worth of audio trimmed down to like 30 minutes and I was devastated.
yeah. Like, and I have like a system, of like how I set up. Like, I know what I'm gonna record next. I never know what I'm going to stream next. I'm working on like putting a schedule, like getting a schedule
Uh-huh.
at some point, and like you know I can do that. But it is the learning process of thinking something's going to be easy, and oh boy,
But
no, it isn't.
yeah, I think that's why the whole telling people get a hobby is such a big thing because when you get a hobby and you have a genuine passion for something, you will learn from that hobby despite being really bad at it
Yeah,
from the jump. Like simple things like baking bread. Like somebody bakes their first loaf of bread and
yeah.
it does feel pretty good because you never baked bread before.
You made something.
Yeah,
Your
it's
effort brought something into the world.
exactly. And so like little things like that, actually being able to participate. Like I guess one thing that I've learned recently, and I found out that I get this from my dad. But
Mm.
I love cooking for people.
Oh, cooking's fun.
Yeah, cooking. I enjoy cooking, but I'm not gonna lie, especially when I was living alone, I wouldn't salt my food. I kind of didn't give a shit. I was just
Yeah,
eating for sustenance. But around the time that I'd started dating, and she had come over and I realized that I was needing to make dinner, I was like, fuck, this has to be really good because I am cooking for somebody else. And at the time I was
right.
kind of stressing myself out over the idea, but as I was putting it together and talking about it with her, I was like, you know what, this is gonna turn out great. I think I know what I'm doing. I didn't, but I managed to make it work well enough.
There you go.
And I realized as I was going, like this is actually kind of fun. Like not just figuring it out, but it was a stir fry that I made, and I was cooking with a wok for the first time.
Mm,
Yeah, and I was like, this is
snazzy.
actually really, really fun to just go around and stir it and getting that motion. It felt very natural. And that's kind of when I discovered that I really like cooking in general, but cooking for other people specifically. I don't know if you were in the, or if you ever listened to them, but every once in a while in the Smash Brothers group chat, I would send an audio message when I was really, really high of a dessert that I was making for myself. and it was just the
No, I do
recipe.
not remember those. When were you? Wait, I missed out on this shit.
And then, yeah, there were recipes of just things that I was making, and it's because I really love to experiment with it. But when I'm like cooking with food, once again, like really getting in there, I kind of feel out what the flavors are gonna do with each other. If that, I don't know if that makes sense, but like I would. So one thing that I figured out is that peanut butter and honey is really good, right?
Okay.
Another thing that I remembered is that honey's really sweet and goes good on a lot of things. And so I was trying to figure out what things I could put it on. And so I grabbed a tortilla, right? And I cooked it until it was kind of nice and golden brown on both sides. Slightly rigid, but still like a little bit flexible, pretty much on the crust. I would light it with peanut butter. I would light it with, and then I put honey right over that, and then I put a bit of cinnamon right on top of that, and I ate that, and that was really good, with a little side of milk. It's not like extravagant. It's not super fancy. It kind of came out ghetto. I was a little high, but it tasted really good.
Oh, that's what it. This is. It's just what it needs to do.
Yeah, it did. It served its purpose. But no, I love doing things like that for myself. But cooking, especially with my wok, I love cooking with this wok, bro. I've cooked a few dinners here with it, with my family, just because it's a lot of fun. But even then, like there's so many nights where it's my turn for dinner. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I grab a bunch of stuff from the pantry that sounds like it'll come together pretty well, and it usually does.
Nice.
I have a small sense for it, and I figured out that came from my dad. Not only that joy of cooking for other people, but that just that sense of like, this is enough of this stuff, or this wouldn't ruin the food. This would be a nice twist on it.
Okay.
Like we both have that same brain. I wonder, going back to nature versus nurture, if that would be in my nature that I got it from him, and I've nurtured that skill into something greater now.
Maybe. I don't know. I could. Trying to think of like stuff I'm thinking of like the concept. This concept I learned in high school, and I'm like trying to remember it properly to bring it into a discussion, but I have no idea for sure.
Uh-huh.
So hopefully I didn't fuck up nature versus nurture, but if I did, then what are they gonna do? Be mad at me?
Yeah, this is none of this is 100% accurate unless we actually quote a source.
Well, even then. Even then. And remember, kids, even if they quote a source, that does not mean that does not mean it's a bad idea to look at the source they're quoting.
Yes, always look at your sources, like study them.
And look at the sources. If you really want to be thorough, you look at the sources to make sure everything is up to snuff.
How deep do we go? Is that
I don't know.
I guess as deep as you want, yeah.
Yeah.
However far back you want. Tying it all together, because this is the How to Love Freely podcast. So the most important thing is that we tie whatever topic it is to the idea of compassion. And I think in different forms of that, when it comes to how love affects learning, I think a really good love can boost the effects of learning greatly.
Yeah.
I think with
when you love something, you want to take it in. You want to experience all of it.
You want to,
and
yeah.
That drives you to learn.
But not only that, like going back to mental conditions, like having an environment that feels like home, that feels healthy to be in. Maybe not even that. Like if being in a bad home and going to an environment like a library, or going to school to get tutored, where that your mental condition doesn't have to be at high alert, It could be at a calm place so it can actually genuinely learn the information it needs to do. It could do the homework that's given. But having an environment with like creating, because at the end of the day, you gotta treat yourself with that kind of compassion to allow yourself to learn things. So if you're leaving yourself in an environment trying to learn things, that's not being compassionate towards yourself. If you leave the environment that you're in and go to a place where you can absorb it, that would be a compassionate gesture towards the self.
You need to give yourself the opportunity to learn and to love and to be your own person.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's like the mental conditions, going back to that, it's if we're not in a healthy state of mind, once again, it's really hard to learn new things. Um, Another place that it affects is like, I think when people fall in love with somebody who speak a different language, very often they will learn the language that that person speaks in.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another sign of compassion or love driving learning in somebody. Absorbing like aspects of the other person. Um, how common is it that people will start using like the same lingo of the people that they're around,
Yeah,
like in friend
you
groups?
pick it up from people around you. And I think part of that is you are taking in you're taking in the language of comfort and you are making that part of you.
Exactly. Um, I feel like the way that people like when they slip back into their accents that they've kind of unlearned in a way. It's not that they unlearned them;
Yeah.
it's that they learned a different way to speak. And when they're like genuinely trying to feel something, like when they're genuinely happy that they can't think, they just act, or they're genuinely angry and they can't think and they just act, it comes out with that accent.
Yeah.
Because that's what's natural to them. That's how they learn to speak. In a way that's how they learn to express that feeling. But yeah, taking in all those aspects of that person, I think that's a way to learn from other people.
Yeah.
The things that they do, what do they call it? Not it's not just the chameleon effect, but it's things like how a dog and their owner supposedly start to look the
Yeah,
same
they
over
start to
the
look
years.
alike. Yeah.
Yeah, things like that, or
Because
it's like
comfort creates familiarity. And
exactly.
that familiarity, the lines between these two different things blur a little
Yeah, and letting that
because you
line
each
blur
take in
is
something from each other.
that blurring is where the learning of the other person happens. Or not other person, but other being. I don't know another way to phrase that. Yeah, I think compassion in this aspect when it comes to learning, like with other people, is allowing them to allowing that mix of their energy with yours. Because I found in a lot of ways, sometimes when people respond with anger, it's because they're getting, like you said before, there's something's happening that didn't go their way. Pretty much is like the basis of it.
Yeah.
But figuring out exactly what that is stepping away from yourself and stepping into them and understanding their situation and seeing like how you would feel with that. Like that's empathy.
And empathy is a learned skill. It's not something, I don't think it's something we necessarily are good at right away.
Well, because it's really easy to like see somebody who's angry and not want to interact with that. Like naturally, you don't want to be around it. But to that, I think it is the job of some people. Like I would say, police have the responsibility to have this in check because of the kind of work they deal with and because of the kind of people they deal with. They have to be able to understand what's going on with the other person to deal with the situation properly.
Right. They need to be able to see beyond the individual self and see kind of the whole of the experiences people might go through.
Well, yeah. What's the? I forget where I heard this story, but it was this woman in a hospital and she was yelling at the front desk, and everybody was like telling her to calm down, and she wasn't wanting to calm down because nobody was telling her where her daughter was being kept at. And she was trying to figure that out. And everywhere she went, they kept denying her, and she got kind of pissed off. And then from that point, they stopped listening to her, which pissed her off even more and escalated the situation until somebody figured out that she was just trying to figure out what room her daughter was in. And then they got that information, and she went on her way. And not to say that outbursts like that are the way to get it, but to understand that the people in that situation before weren't handling the problem. They were just letting it happen.
Yeah.
So being able to handle that situation takes that mixing of them, understanding what's going on with that person. Compassion is letting them bleed into you for a moment so that you can come to an understanding of each other. I think that's how I tie it all back in. A little bow tie, right?
But you I don't know, you covered quite a bit.
Yeah, no, we tend to get a lot done in these two. I think we talked a good like 2 hours. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know. I'm not so good with the numbers these days.
I know it was a really long time, and I'm kind of happy with where we're at. We can call it a wrap here.
All right.
Thank you for coming on. It was really fun talking with you.
Thanks for having me and satisfying my Caucasian desire to be on a podcast.
Anytime, brother. You're welcome. Anytime. Of course, if you have a topic you want to bring up, you can drop it in the Discord here. Discord doesn't have public access quite yet. I'm still needing to work on a few things for it. It will be live, I want to say, by February at the latest. So for now, if you're in the comments, you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, leave a like, of course, subscribe, but of course, leave a comment of your thoughts on this, any of the questions that we've asked here, like going over them again. How do you learn? What are important things that you learn in your life? How does learning change at different times in your life? What does it actually mean to learn something, and how do mental conditions change your learning? Leave answers to that. Leave different suggestions for us to do in the future, different discussions that you would want to hear. And maybe a few people can get into Discord early if they wanted. So yeah, that'll be it. Thank you, Thomas. You have a good night.
Not a problem. Pleasure to be here.
All right, and that's a wrap. Signing off. Peace.
Take care now.